as affecting the child's ability to be a competent communicator. And more importantly, what this leads to is effects on the child's participation in their life as a communicator. So it can lead to a lack of peer acceptance and related access to information in their classroom. Now, I find this model, in thinking about this, as a way to think more broadly about the kinds of interventions we might take on with kids. This bringing the World Health Organization, I was first aware of this model from the point of view of stuttering. And there are some things that are done with young stutterers that I think are helpful to think about for kids who have chronic communication problems as severe as childhood hypoacusia of speech can sometimes be. So if we think about there being the breakdown in speech production and intelligibility, so what can we do that kind of is outside the child that might improve the situation for the child? We can think about things like the room acoustics, right? I mean, on the one hand, is that relevant? But on the other hand, it's something that we could call attention to that might indeed affect the child. Let me go back a second, even though we're running out of time very, very quickly. I'll just try to enlist you into kind of looking into the World Health Organization. Think about somebody who sustains a broken neck. They're paralyzed. We can think about that problem at the cellular level and say, this is where the nervous system is, there's a break in the nervous system. There are people who can work to correct that. But we can also think about, okay, so this has limitations on the person's ability to move. Well, if it's not completely limited, well, we might provide support, physical support to them in a way that allows them to move more fully. If we think about the level of participation in society, this is where this model really comes in, because it says, think about someone, you can have two people with exactly the same degree of physiological problem and functional limitations. And if you think about what can the society do, what can the environment do, you can have very different outcomes for the person. So if we're thinking about the person who is paralyzed, what do you obviously think of as ways of helping them be more of a participant in their community? Wheelchairs and accessible buildings, right? And in the same way, we can think about these kinds of things for children, and how can we ease their participation in the classroom? We can be doing some education in the classroom as an intervention that can be helpful to them and maybe helpful to other kids. This idea and the importance of it for thinking about kids with childhood apraxia of speech came home to me when I was giving a talk for the Kasana organization, which, if I have not mentioned it yet, but you absolutely have to know about apraxia kids and the Kasana organization, because it's a very rich source of information about childhood apraxia of speech. I was speaking to a group in Toronto of parents and clinicians. And the clinicians, some of them were working in situations where they visited the communities that had kids with childhood apraxia of speech once every 2 months. You know, they had huge caseloads, huge territories. They weren't getting to be there. What could they do? Should they just throw up their hands and say, no, we can't make a difference? If you think about, well, what can we do to affect the environment as well as the individual with the problem? Not think about the problem as simply residing in the individual. What could you do that would be helpful potentially to a child with childhood apraxia of speech that you have such little contact with? Well, certainly what you can do is make connections for them. Do education that makes everyone, as many people as possible in that child's environment, aware of things that they can be doing to make things easier. So in a way, it doesn't sound like our job, right? It sounds like, oh, that's somebody else's job. That's someone who's working on a public health level. But with the kids that we see, what might we do to help a child who has childhood apraxia of speech, is in a classroom, and is lacking peer acceptance? Any ideas? Educate the peers. I mean, this is exactly what happens very regularly for kids who are stutterers. They put together a little talk that is at whatever degree of sophistication they're capable of, and certainly kids with childhood apraxia of speech might have some pretty big limitations on what they could contribute. But by informing other kids in the classroom, you might do something that would really make a difference. So I think that we need to be thinking very flexibly in order to have the maximum impact, because in fact, none of us got into this field because we really wanted to move kids up in their correct percentage of our production, right? I mean, no, we got into this field because we wanted to help children be more fully participative in their communities. And so I think the World Health Organization is one place that we can turn to help us think about that. And I believe that I might have had some other strategies that I've included in terms of kind of thinking at these different levels in the handouts that you have. But since I've gone 3 minutes over, and I've already violated your trust once by coming so late, I don't want to violate it a second time by staying too long. So thank you all so much for your attention today, and I really appreciate it.